Hey, Mercedes Pallmeyer here with another Tip Tuesday. So we're going to talk about the counter movement. Counter movement is really what helps us be very dynamic. And in climbing, we can create this counter movement from multiple parts in our body. But more specifically, the more we can use our hips to generate power, the more efficient we're going to be. Now, let's look at the counter movement in other sports. So the first one is very easy, the vertical jump. In order to jump as high as possible, you want to create the optimal counter movement. And a counter movement really is just using your elastic energy in your tendons so that you can be very springy. So as you can see in the vertical jump, I'm going to bring my arms and my hips back at the same time. And then I'm going to explode my hips forward and my arms come up. And then I'm able to jump pretty high. Compared to if I put my hands behind my head and now I start without any kind of counter movement and I jump and I don't get as high as I necessarily need to. This squatting move is actually a great exercise to try to actually get better at explosive movement. So you can kind of put some constraints on the move so that you can be as explosive as possible in a dead point. So now let's look at the counter movement in climbing. So here I'm just doing a couple big moves and I'm trying to use my hips as much as possible. My arms are just going along for the ride. I'm really not trying to intentionally move my arms in and out. My focus is pulling the hips back and then into the wall and up to the handhold. However, sometimes, depending on the position, you may need to just use your legs to do the counter movement and your arms don't move at all because maybe the handholds are pretty small, maybe they're really hard to hold. You don't want to create a lot of movement on those handholds. Maybe the footholds are really small, but you can't quite move your hips back. So you can create the counter movement with your hands or your arms and your neck. So you can kind of do this like chicken head kind of situation as well. So now that you know what the counter movement looks like, I want you to start applying it. You can try this on overhangs because overhangs is really where we can use the full momentum of our hips. And if you look at professional climbers, let's say Adam Andra on silence, he is being very dynamic. It's subtle, but he's constantly using the small dynamic movements so that he doesn't have to lock off and be super slow and drain all of his energy with every move. Dynamic movements or this counter movement really helps to be more efficient. So I want you to try this. Give it a go on this overhang position and see how well you're moving your hips back and forth. And you can go back to the squat position and just practice vertical jumps. You can also try this on a pull-up bar and you can do the counter movement through your hips and your arms at the same time, or you can try just your hips or just the arms. And as you can tell, when I'm just using my arms, it's quite difficult, but I'm still able to create momentum. So you've practiced this with the squat, you've practiced this on the pull-up bar, maybe you've practiced this on overhangs. And the best thing is to video yourself and just see how well you're doing with that counter movement. And you can go back to last week's video where I was talking about coordinated movement, catching handholds at the same time. So try to employ this idea of the counter movement, making sure that it's from the hips first, and then depending on the situation, you could just use the legs or the arms. All right, so that is it for this week, and I'll see you next week.